Friends, fellow Americans, I need to talk to you today about something that's unfolding right now, something that most people have absolutely no idea about. It's one of those moments that makes you stop and wonder what happened to the country we all love. You see, there's a name you need to know, a name that should be on everyone's lips, but somehow isn't getting the attention it deserves. That name is Mahmood Mamdani. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, who is that? I've never heard that name before. Well, that's exactly the problem. That's exactly what I want to talk about today. Because what just happened to this man, what Donald Trump just did, it tells us everything we need to know about where we are as a nation right now. Let me tell you who Mahmood Mamdani is. He's not some political operative. He's not a partisan warrior or someone looking for a fight. No, Mahmood Mamdani is a scholar, professor at Columbia University, one of the most respected academic institutions in the world. He spent decades studying colonialism, studying democracy, studying how power works, and how societies either thrive or crumble under the weight of their own contradictions. He's authored books that are taught in universities across this country and around the globe. This is a man who has dedicated his entire life to understanding the world, to teaching the next generation, to asking the hard questions that make us think deeper about who we are and what we stand for. And what did Donald Trump just do to him? He banned him from entering the United States. Think about that for a moment. A world-renowned scholar, someone who has contributed more to intellectual discourse than most of us could in 10 lifetimes, is now forbidden from stepping foot in this country. This is America. We're talking about the land of the free, the place that's supposed to welcome the best and brightest minds from around the world. Now, you might be asking yourself, why? Why would anyone ban a professor? What possible threat could an academic pose? And here's where it gets truly disturbing. The official reason given was vague, something about national security concerns, some bureaucratic language that means nothing and everything at the same time. But let me tell you what this is really about. This is about silencing voices. This is about making sure that certain perspectives, certain truths, certain uncomfortable questions don't get asked on American soil. You see, Mahmood Mamdani has been a critic, not a reckless critic, not someone throwing bombs from the sidelines, but a thoughtful, measured voice who has dared to question American foreign policy, who has dared to examine our role in global conflicts, who has dared to ask whether our actions abroad always match the values we claim to hold dear. And apparently in Trump's America, that kind of questioning is now grounds for exclusion. This isn't happening in a vacuum, my friends. This is part of something much larger, much more troubling. We're seeing a pattern here, a playbook that's being run right before our eyes. And if we're not careful, if we're not paying attention, we're going to wake up one day and realize that the country we knew is gone. Let me tell you, this administration has been systematically targeting academics, journalists, activists, anyone who dares to speak truth to power. We've seen travel bans that disproportionately affect people from certain countries, certain religions. We've seen rhetoric that demonizes immigrants, that paints entire communities as threats. We've seen policies that make it harder for international students to study here, for researchers to collaborate across borders, for the free exchange of ideas that has always been the lifeblood of American innovation and progress. And now we have a direct targeted ban against a man whose only crime is thinking too much, questioning too deeply, teaching too effectively. But here's where it gets worse. Here's what they're not telling you on the evening news. This ban against Mamdani wasn't just some random bureaucratic decision sources close to the State Department. People who are watching this unfold from the inside and are deeply troubled by what they're seeing, they're telling us that this came directly from the top. This was a deliberate decision, carefully calculated, designed to send a message. And what's that message? It's simple and it's chilling. Step out of line, question our policies, challenge our narrative, and you will be punished. You will be excluded. You will be silenced. This is the kind of thing we used to criticize other countries for doing. We used to point to authoritarian regimes and say, look at how they treat their intellectuals. Look at how they ban dissenting voices. Look at how they use state power to crush independent thought. And now we're doing it ourselves. The implications here are staggering. Think about what this means for academic freedom. Think about what this means for universities that want to invite scholars from around the world to speak, to teach, to engage with American students. Think about what this means for the next generation of thinkers, researchers, activists who are watching this happen and learning the lesson that speaking truth can cost you everything. This isn't just about one man. This isn't just about Mahmood Mamdani, though his story matters immensely. This is about the soul of our democracy. This is about whether we're going to be a country that embraces difficult conversations or one that fears them. Whether we're going to be a nation that welcomes the world's brightest minds or one that builds walls to keep them out, whether we're going to uphold the constitutional principles of free speech and open inquiry, or whether we're going to let those principles erode in the name of security, in the name of loyalty, in the name of making America great again. Let me tell you something I've learned over my years in public life. Real strength isn't about shutting people up. Real strength isn't about banning the voices you disagree with. Real strength is having the confidence, the courage to engage with ideas that challenge you, to listen to perspectives that make you uncomfortable, to wrestle with complexity rather than hiding from it. What we're seeing from this administration is the opposite of strength. This is weakness. This is fear. This is the behavior of leaders who know their arguments can't stand up to scrutiny, so they eliminate the scrutiny instead. And make no mistake, when you start going down that path, when you start using the power of the state to silence intellectual dissent, you're not protecting America. You're betraying everything America stands for. Now, I want you to understand the specifics here because the details matter. On the 15th of October, 2024, Mahmood Mamdani received notice that his visa had been revoked under Section 2123B of the Immigration and Nationality Act. That's the section that deals with terrorist activities. Let that sink in. They're treating a professor like a terrorist. A man who has spent his career in libraries and classrooms is now being classified alongside people who commit acts of violence. The notification came from the Department of Homeland Security, but sources indicate that the decision was made after a meeting at the White House involving senior advisor Stephen Miller and several officials from the State Department. This wasn't some low-level bureaucrat making a judgment call. This was orchestrated from the highest levels of government. And here's what's particularly disturbing. The evidence cited in the classified portion of the file, according to someone who has seen it and is willing to speak on condition of anonymity because they fear for their job, the evidence is primarily based on Mamdani's published writings and public speeches. They're banning him for his ideas, for his words, for his scholarship. And this next part is crucial. Let me tell you about the timeline, because when you see how this unfolded, the calculated nature of this attack becomes crystal clear. In August 2024, just 2 months before the ban, Mamdani delivered a lecture at the University of California, Berkeley, titled "Democracy and Empire, Can They Coexist?" The lecture was streamed online, watched by tens of thousands of people. In it, he argued with the kind of rigorous historical analysis that has made him one of the most respected scholars in his field, that American foreign policy has often contradicted our stated democratic values. He pointed to specific examples backed by declassified documents of moments when our government supported authoritarian regimes because they served our strategic interests. He wasn't making wild accusations. He wasn't engaging in conspiracy theories. He was doing what scholars do, examining evidence, drawing connections, asking us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own history. Within days of that lecture, according to sources familiar with the matter, a memo began circulating within certain circles in Washington. The memo, which has not been made public, but which multiple sources have confirmed exists, characterized Mamdani as a threat to American interests abroad. Not a physical threat, not a security threat in any traditional sense, but a threat to what they called narrative control. Think about that phrase for a moment, narrative control. What they're saying in the language of authoritarians everywhere is that this man's ideas are dangerous because they challenge the official story, because they make people think critically, because they encourage citizens to ask questions about what their government is doing in their name. And so the decision was made at the highest levels to silence him, to make an example of him, to send a message to every other scholar, every other intellectual, every other person with a platform: stay in line or this could happen to you too. The reaction from the academic community has been swift and fierce. Over 2,000 professors from universities across the country have signed an open letter condemning this ban. Columbia University released a statement calling it a grave threat to academic freedom and intellectual inquiry. The American Association of University Professors has labeled it an unprecedented attack on the principles that underpin higher education in a free society. But here's what worries me. Despite all of this, despite the outcry from people who actually understand what's at stake, there's been remarkably little coverage in the mainstream media. A few articles here and there buried on page 7, mentioned in passing on the evening news, if mentioned at all. It's as if the story is too uncomfortable, too complicated, too politically fraught to really dig into. And that's exactly what the administration is counting on. They're counting on our short attention spans, on our fatigue with outrage, on our willingness to move on to the next scandal without fully grasping the significance of this one. This is a test, my friends. This is a test of whether we still have the will to defend our most fundamental values. Because if we let this stand, if we allow the government to ban scholars based on their ideas, what comes next? Do we start banning journalists who write articles critical of our foreign policy? Do we start revoking credentials for researchers whose findings are politically inconvenient? Do we start building a list of acceptable thoughts and unacceptable thoughts, deciding who gets to participate in American discourse and who doesn't? This is how democracies die, not with a bang, but with 1,000 small concessions. 1,000 little moments where we say, well, this one isn't worth fighting for, or this one is just too complicated to understand, or this one doesn't affect me directly, so why should I care? Each time we make that choice, each time we let something slide, we make the next violation easier, the next abuse more likely, the next attack on our freedoms less shocking. Now, let me tell you something that might surprise you. This isn't just affecting scholars in the humanities or social sciences. The ripple effects of this ban are being felt across the entire academic community, including in fields you might not expect. Scientists, engineers, medical researchers, they're all watching this and they're all worried, because if the government can ban someone for their political views, for their analysis of foreign policy, what's to stop them from banning researchers whose scientific findings contradict administration policy? What happens to the climate scientist whose data shows we're in crisis when the administration wants to deny that crisis exists? What happens to the public health expert whose recommendations clash with political considerations? What happens to the economist whose research suggests that certain policies are harming working families when those policies are central to the administration's agenda? I've spoken to researchers in multiple fields over the past weeks, and let me tell you what they're telling me. They're scared, not in a dramatic, overwrought way, but in a quiet, deeply troubling way. They're reconsidering international collaborations. They're thinking twice before publishing findings that might be seen as politically inconvenient. They're advising their graduate students to be careful about what they study, what they write, what they say in public. This is the chilling effect in action. This is how intellectual freedom dies. Not all at once, but slowly, as fear creeps into spaces that should be governed by curiosity and the pursuit of truth. When scholars start self-censoring, when universities become afraid to invite controversial speakers, when research agendas are shaped by political considerations rather than scientific merit, we all lose. Every single one of us becomes poorer for it. But in the middle of all this darkness, in the middle of this assault on everything we hold dear, I want you to know that there are still people fighting. There are still people standing up. Mahmood Mamdani himself has not been silent. From his home in Kampala, Uganda, where he was when the ban was imposed, he released a statement that should inspire every one of us. He said, "I am being punished for asking questions that make people in power uncomfortable, but I will not stop asking those questions. The pursuit of truth is not a crime, and I refuse to treat it as one." If America no longer wants scholars who think critically, who challenge assumptions, who seek to understand complexity, then America has lost its way. But I have faith that the American people, the students I've taught, the colleagues I've worked with, the citizens who still believe in the Constitution, they will not let this stand. They will fight for the principles that made America a beacon of intellectual freedom, and I will fight alongside them, even if I cannot physically be there. That's the kind of courage we need right now. That's the kind of moral clarity that should shame every single person who is going along with this travesty. And he's not alone. Organizations like the ACLU have already filed a... Every day there's a new outrage, a new scandal, a new abuse of power, and we can barely keep track of it all. That's by design, my friends. That's the strategy. Overwhelm us with so much that we can't focus on any one thing long enough to do something about it. But we have to resist that. We have to plant our feet and say, no, this one matters. This one we're going to pay attention to. This one we're going to fight. Because if we don't, if we let them ban Mahmood Mamdani without consequence, then who's next? Is it the professor at your local university who teaches uncomfortable truths about American history? Is it the journalist who uncovers corruption in government? Is it the activist who organizes protests for causes you care about? Is it you because you posted something on social media that someone in power didn't like? Let me tell you what this looks like on a human level, because that's what gets lost in all the policy discussions and legal arguments. Mahmood Mamdani is 76 years old. He has dedicated his entire life to education, to scholarship, to making the world a better place. Through understanding, he has students at Columbia who were in the middle of writing dissertations under his guidance. Young scholars whose entire academic futures depend on his mentorship. Those students are now scrambling, trying to figure out how to continue their research without their advisor. He has colleagues who were collaborating with him on research projects that could have contributed to our understanding of democracy, conflict, and social change. Those projects are now in limbo. He has speaking engagements that have been canceled, conferences he cannot attend, seminars he cannot teach. And beyond all of that, he has the dignity of a man who has done nothing wrong, who has broken no laws, who has simply exercised the intellectual freedom that should be the birthright of every scholar. And that dignity has been trampled on by a government that is supposed to protect freedom, not destroy it. This is what injustice looks like. It's not always dramatic. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, bureaucratic, hidden behind official language and procedures. But it's injustice nonetheless, and it demands our attention, our outrage, and our action. So what do we do? What do we do when we see our government engaging in this kind of behavior? First, we have to stay informed. We have to seek out the stories that aren't being told on the mainstream news. We have to read the academic journals, listen to the podcasts, follow the organizations that are tracking these abuses. Second, we have to speak out. We have to make our voices heard. We have to tell our representatives in Congress that this is unacceptable, that we demand accountability, that we expect them to use their oversight powers to investigate how and why this decision was made. Third, we have to support the organizations that are fighting back, the ACLU, the academic freedom groups, the legal clinics that are taking these cases. They need our financial support, our volunteer time, our commitment to the long fight ahead. But most importantly, we have to remember what this country is supposed to be. We're supposed to be a nation that welcomes the world's brightest minds, that engages with difficult ideas, that isn't afraid of being challenged or questioned. We're supposed to be a democracy where power is checked, where rights are protected, where no one, not even the president, is above the law or beyond accountability. That's the promise. That's the ideal. And yes, we've fallen short of it many times throughout our history, but we've also had moments where we rose to meet it, where we corrected our mistakes, where we expanded freedom rather than contracting it. This is one of those moments. This is one of those tests. And the question is, are we going to pass it? Are we going to stand up for Mahmood Mamdani and for the principles he represents? Or are we going to let fear and apathy win? I know what you might be thinking. You're busy. You've got your own problems. The economy is tough. Prices are high. You're worried about your job, your family, your future. You might think, this is just one professor. How does this really affect me? And I'm here to tell you it affects you in every way that matters. Because a country that bans scholars today will ban other voices tomorrow. A government that silences dissent in universities will silence dissent everywhere. A society that loses its commitment to intellectual freedom will lose its capacity for progress, innovation, and self-correction. This isn't about one man. This is about the kind of country we want to be. This is about whether we're going to have a future where our children can think freely, speak freely, learn freely, or whether we're going to descend into a place where conformity is enforced and questioning is punished. Let me tell you about the broader pattern here because context matters. This ban on Mamdani is just the latest in a series of actions that should alarm anyone who cares about democracy. In the past year alone, we've seen the Trump administration revoke press credentials for journalists who ask tough questions, launch investigations into universities that teach critical perspectives on American history, threaten to cut federal funding to schools that don't teach what the administration considers appropriate curriculum, propose new rules that would make it easier to deport international students for participating in protests, and now this, banning a renowned scholar for his ideas. Each of these actions taken individually might seem like an isolated incident, but taken together, they form a clear pattern. This is a systematic effort to control the narrative, to punish dissent, to create a climate of fear where people self-censor because they're afraid of the consequences of speaking out. And here's what really gets me, what really makes my blood boil. The people doing this, they wrap themselves in the flag. They talk about patriotism. They claim they're protecting America. But banning scholars isn't protecting America. Silencing dissent isn't patriotism. Using state power to punish people for their ideas isn't strength. It's the opposite of everything this country stands for. The real patriots are people like Mahmood Mamdani, who even in the face of persecution continues to pursue truth. The real patriots are the lawyers who are fighting this in court, the professors who are speaking out, the students who are organizing protests, the citizens who are paying attention and refusing to let this become normal. That's what patriotism looks like. That's what love of country means. Not blind loyalty to whoever happens to be in power, but fierce commitment to the principles that define us as a nation. And here's something else they don't want you to know: the economic cost of actions like this. When you ban a scholar of Mamdani's caliber, when you create an environment where international academics fear coming to the United States, you're not just hurting our intellectual life, you're hurting our economy. American universities are economic engines. They generate billions of dollars in economic activity. They employ hundreds of thousands of people. They attract the brightest minds from around the world, many of whom stay and contribute to American innovation, American entrepreneurship, American prosperity. When we send a message that certain ideas aren't welcome here, when we create a climate of fear and intimidation, we don't just lose the scholars we ban, we lose all the scholars who decide it's not worth the risk to come here. We lose the graduate students who choose to study elsewhere. We lose the research collaborations that drive innovation. We lose our competitive edge in the global knowledge economy. I've talked to university presidents, and let me tell you what they're telling me. International applications are down. Scholars are declining invitations to visit American campuses. Research partnerships are being relocated to Canada, to Europe, to other countries that still value academic freedom. This is brain drain in action. This is what happens when short-sighted political calculations override long-term strategic thinking. The irony is thick here, my friends. An administration that claims to be putting America first is actively undermining one of our greatest competitive advantages, our ability to attract and retain the world's best and brightest minds. They're weakening us in the name of strength. They're making us smaller in the name of making us great. They're betraying our values in the name of protecting them, and the cost of all this, the true cost, won't be fully understood for years or even decades, but it will be real and it will be substantial. Now, I want to talk about what success looks like here, because we need to have a vision for how this gets better. Success means getting this ban overturned. It means Mahmood Mamdani returning to Columbia, resuming his teaching, continuing his research, participating fully in the academic community he has served so well. But it's more than that. Success means establishing clear legal precedents that prevent this from happening again. It means passing legislation, if necessary, to protect academic freedom, to ensure that scholars cannot be banned based on their ideas. It means holding accountable the officials who made this decision, understanding how it happened, making sure there are consequences for abusing power in this way. And most fundamentally, success means changing the culture, changing the conversation, reaffirming as a society that we value intellectual diversity, that we welcome difficult questions, that we're strong enough to hear views we disagree with without resorting to censorship and exclusion. We deserve better than this. We deserve leaders who understand that democracy requires robust debate, who respect the role of universities and intellectuals in society, who see diversity of thought as a strength rather than a threat. We deserve a government that uses its power to protect rights, not violate them. We deserve a country where a scholar like Mahmood Mamdani can teach, research, and speak without fear of retribution. That's not asking too much. That's asking for the bare minimum of what a free society should provide. And if we're not getting that right now, if our current leadership is failing that test, then it's up to us to demand better, to organize, to vote, to make our voices heard in every way we can. Let me tell you what gives me hope. What always gives me hope about America, it's moments like this that bring out the best in people. Already, I'm seeing students organizing teach-ins about academic freedom. I'm seeing professors dedicating their lectures to discussing what's at stake when governments try to control ideas. I'm seeing legal organizations mobilizing, journalists investigating, citizens paying attention and demanding answers. This is the immune system of democracy kicking in. This is what happens when enough people decide that they're not going to let something slide, that they're going to stand up and fight. And history shows us that when Americans come together around principle, when we unite behind our highest values, we can move mountains. We've done it before. We've overcome greater challenges than this, and we can do it again. But we have to be clear-eyed about the opposition. The forces behind this ban, they're well-organized, well-funded, and deeply committed to their vision of America, which is an America where dissent is punished, where conformity is enforced, where power is consolidated in the hands of a few. They're not going to give up easily. They're going to fight every step of the way. They're going to use every tool at their disposal, every lever of power, every tactic of intimidation and division. So, we have to be just as committed, just as persistent, just as willing to fight for our vision, which is an America that lives up to its promises, that protects freedom for everyone, that remains a beacon of hope and opportunity for the world. This is the moment we're in. This is the choice in front of us. We can accept what's happening to Mahmood Mamdani, shrug our shoulders, move on to the next outrage, let this become just another forgotten story in the endless stream of bad news where we can plant our feet, raise our voices, and say enough. Say that we will not tolerate the banning of scholars for their ideas. Say that we will defend academic freedom with everything we have. Say that we refuse to let America become a country that fears intellectual inquiry and punishes those who ask uncomfortable questions. I know which choice I'm making. I know where I stand. And I hope, I pray, I believe that you're going to stand with me, because this isn't about politics. This isn't about left or right, Democrat or Republican. This is about right and wrong. This is about the fundamental values that should unite all Americans regardless of our other differences. So here's what I'm asking you to do. First, educate yourself. Learn about Mahmood Mamdani, read his work, understand what he's contributed to our collective knowledge. Second, speak out, talk to your friends and family about this, post about it on social media, write to your representatives, make some noise. Third, support the fight, donate to the organizations challenging this ban, show up to protests and rallies, sign petitions, make your presence known, and finally, remember this moment, remember what happened here, remember who stood up and who looked away, because there will be more moments like this. There will be more tests of our commitment to freedom, and we need to be ready. We need to have learned the lesson that silence is complicity, that apathy is surrender, that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. Let me be very clear about what the stakes are here. If we lose this fight, if we allow the government to ban scholars based on their ideas, we are fundamentally changing what America is. We're saying that intellectual freedom is negotiable, that the First Amendment has limits we never imagined, that power can be used to crush dissent without consequence. And once we cross that line, it's very hard to come back. The precedent is set, the norm is established, and the next abuse of power becomes easier. The next violation less shocking, the next step toward authoritarianism more inevitable. That's not a future I want for my children or grandchildren. That's not the America I believe in. And I'm betting it's not the America you believe in either. So as we come to the end of this conversation, I want to leave you with this thought. History will remember this moment. History will record what happened to Mahmood Mamdani and how we responded. And when our children and grandchildren ask us what we did when scholars were being banned for their ideas, when intellectual freedom was under assault, when the principles of democracy were being tested, what will we tell them? Will we say we stayed silent because it was easier, because we were tired, because we didn't think it affected us? Or will we say we stood up, we fought back, we refused to let America lose its way? That's the choice. That's always the choice. And it's a choice we make not once, but every day. In every action we take or don't take, in every word we speak or remain unspoken, I'm asking you to choose courage. I'm asking you to choose principle. I'm asking you to choose the hard path of resistance over the easy path of compliance, because that's what this moment demands. That's what Mahmood Mamdani deserves. That's what America needs. And I truly believe that if we all stand together, if we all commit to this fight, we can win. We can overturn this ban. We can protect academic freedom. We can send a message to those in power that we will not be intimidated. We will not be silenced. We will not surrender our values without a fight. That's the America I know. That's the America I love. And that's the America worth fighting for. Now, let me know what you think. Drop your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. And if you believe, like I do, that we need to keep shining a light on these abuses of power, then like this video and subscribe to this channel, because our democracy isn't a spectator sport. It's on all of us to protect it. Together, we can make sure that what Trump just did to Manny doesn't stand, doesn't become normal, doesn't define who we are as a nation. The future is in our hands. Let's not waste this moment.